From rolling up posters and selling merchandise to tour managing some of the biggest rock bands in history, she's been described as a trailblazer and a female pioneer. But I happen to know that our guest today isn't so keen on those kinds of labels, and we can get into why a little later on. Having had the chance to meet and talk as one tour manager to another, I would prefer to describe her as an inspiration to anyone currently working in or hoping to work in the live music industry, and certainly has some stories to tell. Now an educator, coach and mentor, and soon to be an internationally published author with the release of her book Lipstick and Leather, On the Road with the World's Most Notorious Rock Stars, which is being published by the Highlands' very own Sandstone Press. I'm excited and privileged to be able to welcome to XpoNorth Digital 2021, Kim Hawes.
Hi, hello everybody.
Hi, Kim, how are you doing?
I'm really good, thank you, Olly. I'm really good. I'm very excited to be part of XpoNorth this year because
we're incredibly excited to have you as part of our program. Thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you, thank you.
As I mentioned in my intro, you and I had the opportunity to have a really good chat a couple of weeks back now, which was the first time that I got to meet you, and I sort of expected a little half an hour chit chat, and as I remember, we ended up being on the Zoom call for about an hour and a half.
That's correct. Yeah.
And I could have quite easily carried on for another hour and a half, picking your brains on the intricacies of an industry that I'm integrally involved in. So it's really great to be able to speak to you today. I should also mention Kim has gone from being a live music innovator to a public health hero, and is currently working in a COVID test center, and has been given a little bit of time off to come and speak to us today. So, but I don't want to embarrass you. So
my decorations behind me, we did find a few pot plants to make it a bit more lively out there.
Given the title of the book, Lipstick and Leather, I wasn't necessarily expecting foliage in the background. I was expecting something way more dramatic and rock and roll, but you've gone very clean cut for our chat today, Kim.
I have, but it's basically the lipstick against the leather. I don't know if it was the era that I was mostly on tour with or my beginnings, because I learned my trade from 10 years of touring with Motorhead. Okay, and I was so young. I was 19 years of age, and I remember my first look at Lemmy, and he scared the hell out of me, you know.
I can imagine he would, because he always had the Lemmy look that we all came to know and love. But as a 19-year-old girl entering this world, it must have been quite the impact.
I'm going to tell you a real quick story of my first day in the office of 15 Great Western Roads, when I'd actually got my first job as merchandising. And I rang the doorbell. I was so nervous. I rang the doorbell and I heard this woman go, "Come in," you know, press the door. Oh, I was like trying to press the door, hold my suitcase, the whole thing, like I said, shaking. Went in and there was 2 sofas there, and she just said, "Take a seat." So I sat down, and Lemmy was sat on the other sofa, and he was just looking me up and down and wondering who I was or what I was doing there. And then on this lady's desk, this lady was called Motorcycle Irene. Okay. Now picture
this.
In
any other world, that would have been the most obscure name to have, but it kind of makes sense in that context.
She had the jet black hair down to the waist, back combed, very high, long black hair. She had what I can only describe as not a mini skirt, more of a mini belt on, okay? Then she had thigh-length leather boots on that, and black nail polish, the whole works, and loads of makeup. And Lemmy and her were having a conversation. And I didn't notice this, but she picks up this straight jacket from off her desk.
Where
And
are we
then,
going with this, Kim? Is this safe for pre-watershed?
it is safe, but it just shows you how nervous I was. And they both looked over at me, and she went, "Come here a minute." So I was like, "Okay," and Lemmy went, "Try it on." Right, and so did Irene. They're like, "Try it on." So they put me in this straight jacket. So there's this 19-year-old. I think it was the third time I'd ever been in London, ever, sitting in this office that I'd never been in before, and I was put into a straight jacket. And then they just left me, and I was like, "Okay, what do I do now?" And they went, "Get out of it." Okay.
Okay.
So, but then
as job interviews go, it's definitely up there in the most obscure bracket.
Well, it was, because they literally left me there for about 10, 15 minutes with a straight jacket on this sofa. And I just didn't know what to say. I didn't know what to do. I didn't know who to ask to get me out of it, until the manager, that was like Doug Smith, just phoned down, and he went, "Send her up now." So Irene looked at me and went, "You can go now." And I'm like, "What am I supposed to do?" And she went, "It's okay, I'll take you out of it." But they were giggling like mad in the corner. They just thought it was hysterical.
Well, it's really nice that they took you out of the straitjacket before you then went off to actually go and speak to somebody.
Exactly.
We should rewind at this point. I mean, just for anybody that's tuning in, by the way, please feel free to send over any questions that you may have for Kim. We're going to we'll get to a bit of a Q&A in the last 10 or 15 minutes of our time together, but send them through from now, and then we can start collating those. But please do. So Kim, how? We'll get on to the really rock and roll stuff. Not that it gets much more. Oh no, it does get more rock and roll than that, I suppose. How did you find yourself in that position? Again, I mentioned in the intro that you started off behind the merch counter, but did you have any understanding that there was potentially a career, quote unquote, for you to take within the live music? Was that ever on your horizons? How did you find yourself coming through the merchandise role, and then in a position where you're sat in an office with Lemmy in a straitjacket? How did you get to that point?
Basically, I mean, when I was at school, I always wanted to be an astronaut. Okay, I'd seen the guys land on the moon at 9, and I wanted to be an astronaut.
Always been aiming sky high, Kim.
Yes, absolutely. So that was my dream. The problem was, at the 1960s, early 70s, the courses that young girls were being offered in high school were secretarial courses. And because I didn't want to be a secretary, it's not even a personal assistant, it was a secretary, as was quote. Oh. So I was told that I'd make a good shop assistant.
Wow.
And that was what the careers advisors were telling me to go for.
Talk about raising hopes and expectations.
Yeah. And I knew that just wasn't for me. So I'd done some swimming, and I'd swum for a couple of local teams, etc. So the obvious thing was to go and learn how to be a swimming instructor. The problem was I didn't even really want that, okay?
But it was, I suppose at that point, it's one step up. It's a couple of steps up from shop assistant, which you'd been told was your aim in life.
And when it even gets worse than that, actually, because when I was questioning this shop assistant, they were going, "Well, a nice shop, like a nice department store, not just any shop."
Oh, cheers.
Exactly, so it kind of makes that worse. But I got into the music industry because of a lie, a massive fat lie, and because I was drunk at the time. My best friend and I were absolutely in awe of Elvis Costello and the Attractions. Okay. And my best friend was going to marry Elvis Costello. I personally,
under any circumstances, she was marrying Elvis Costello.
I was actually going to marry Steve Naive, who was the keyboard player.
Okay. So you had it all wrapped up. Perfect.
Totally. This is what we were going to do. They didn't have the same idea about it, and they'd never met us, so this was the hard one. But we did have tickets to go see.
Are the restraining orders still in place?
So, but we went to see them at Preston Guildhall, and we had a bet between the two of us on who was actually going to meet them that night.
Okay.
We got drunk. We went in, and I don't even know to this day what possessed me to do it. But I walked straight up to the stage, and I'd been lucky enough to spend the Christmas before the February when we went to see them. I was in America for the Christmas, and they were on Saturday Night Live. And it was a very famous performance of theirs that I didn't know at the time, but I found out later. It was a very controversial performance played by them. They were standing in for the Sex Pistols that night. They weren't really supposed to be on Saturday Night Live. So again, in this country, people have got to remember this was before the internet. This was before phones across the Atlantic. Well, there were phones, but nobody used them because it was too expensive. So communication wasn't like it was, like it is now.
Very restricted and very, very controlled, and the stream of information that we now have just didn't exist.
Yeah. So I go up to the backstage and I said, I think I said, I was with Elvis Costello when they filmed Saturday Night Live in New York. One, nobody in Preston, I don't think at the time, had ever heard of Saturday Night Live. Two, for somebody to be with them while they filmed. Well, this guy, a tour manager, he actually went, and if you and I would probably fall for this one too. We went, this must be true. This isn't a porky. She actually knows them.
Yeah.
So come back after the show, wait here for me, and I'm sure they'd love to see you again, So make sure after the show, just come back here. I'll wait for you. So after the show, I did. I went straight back to where I was, and the guy was there waiting for me. He went, come on, let's go. We're going backstage. Well, They've Gone.
You're like, no, surely not. You can't possibly have fallen for this.
I can't really remember because it was so long ago, but I think it just all happened so quickly, and the excitement was just too much. Jackie, my friend, wouldn't come with me. She chickened out. She went to the bus station, and I was just with the guy. And I went through this, and he said they'd gone to the hotel. So he was like, come with me, I'll take you to the hotel, because it was literally across the road. We walked across the road, and they were in the bar, which was on the first floor. Walked up the stairs, they were all sat around this huge round table, and the tour manager, he just pulled up this seat, and I sat down. Wow. My mouth wide open, because I was like, oh, I'm sat with them. Yeah. And it kind of then cottoned on to the fact that nobody knew who I was.
No, nobody was really referencing you. You sort of became
Yeah. So he then went, come here a minute, dragged me out, and he went, you don't know them, do you? I was like, no idea who they are really, and I explained how I'd seen them on TV. And then he was like, I can't believe somebody's actually got one over on me. As you and I were in the same situation.
Oh yeah, I mean, if I was in that scenario, I would be furious. Yes. At myself more than anything, and then and then I'd be expected to get my marching orders and pack my stuff and take it off the bus and go home.
So he basically just said to me, it kind of gets a bit sexist now. In this day and age, you would call it out.
Sure.
But we are still friends. So I want to make that point now, so that anybody doesn't go, oh, well, that's awful, this guy needs whatever, arresting or what. No.
But as you were saying, different eras, different contexts.
Yes. And he just said, do you want to spend the night? And I was like, no, I've got to catch the bus home. Why do you want to stay? And I'm like, no, I'm going home. I've got a bus to catch. And I took flight. Like I'd done what I had to. Anyway, he said, I'll take your number and I'll give you a call and you can come to another show. So he gave me a call, and he said, do you want to come on the rest of the tour? It was only like a week left. Mm-hmm. So of course I was like, going. Never even thought about it. And I said to my mum, can I go? She knew that if she said no, I would have gone anyway.
You were going anyway, right?
Absolutely.
You were of that age, in that world, and you've just had what, for a music loving teenage young woman, is the invite of your absolute life.
Yes, of course it was. So I was going out the window if she said no. She was very clever because she then spoke to the guy on the phone when he called the next day, and she said, I need to know where you're going, which hotels you're staying at, and as much information as you can give me.
Mm-hmm.
She then took that information and she booked me my own room at these hotels. So there was no question of anything ever happening.
Yeah.
When I arrived at the first gig, I was so excited, but they'd already played that night, or it was a day off. But anyway, I met the guy in the bar and he said, we better go to bed. We've got to get up early in the morning. So we both went to the lift. He pressed one button, I pressed another. And he was like, where are you going? I was like, I've got my own room. I'm going to bed. You said we're going to bed. So he stormed off. I went to bed. That was it. I went to the gig the next morning, hadn't heard from him, just went to the gig. And I sat in the corner looking at everything that was going on. I watched the load in, I watched everything, the stage being set up. And I sat there thinking, I thought this would be so glamorous,
Mm-hmm.
This is rock and roll. I thought it'd be so exciting. And it was so boring. And I'm sat in the corner with nobody saying a word. Nobody spoke to me.
Watching what was exclusively at that point a bunch of gruff, sweaty, scary men go about go about their business in the most mundane way, as you and I both know a gig setup is.
Yes, exactly. And it was cold and it was dark, damp, and just sat in the corner, like you say, watching everything. And then it got to like 5:30, and there seemed to be a lot of hustle and bustle going on. And this one guy was like shouting at me, had I seen Lorraine, like, had I seen her, where was she? I was like, I didn't even know who this person was.
Right.
And then he said, the t-shirt, the merchandising girl, where is she? Where is she? And then somebody else just shouted across the room, she's at the hospital. She's not well, she's in hospital. And he just turned around to me and looked at me and went, do you know anything about selling? I was like, okay.
Well, I was once told that I should aspire to be working in retail as a shop assistant. So yeah, I guess I do.
So I went and I was like, right. He said, you're going to sell shirts tonight. We have nobody to sell shirts. You're going to do it.
Okay.
And he told me what to do, and I did it. Lorraine came back. We both sold shirts together, and we did it the next night, and we did it till the end of the tour.
Oh, well, that worked nicely. At least he hadn't nicked Lorraine's job.
No, so that was good. And we had fun, and it was just the best time. Like you said, it was a dream come true. I finished the tour finished, I went home, never thought a thing about it, never even then thought this was a job I could do. But a few weeks later, the company called me back, and this lady said to me, the lady was called Eve Carr, and she said, I believe you sold shirts for my company on Elvis Costello. It's like, yeah, I did. She said, did you have a good time? Did you enjoy it? It's like, did I? Of course I did, yeah. She said, okay, do you want to do it again? Because I believe you did it quite well. Right. Here was my shop assistant days coming along.
Like, damn it, the careers advisor was right. Didn't quite get the scenario correct, but I'm selling merch.
So that was it. What she didn't tell me was it was for a different band called Rush.
Right.
Who like it came out eventually, and I'm like, who are Rush? I'd never heard of this band. Obviously, Canadian alternative rock type band. Never heard of them.
Still at that point where I guess they were building their profile at that point.
Yeah. And it was 6 weeks in Europe.
Wow.
From a girl coming from this little tiny farming village in Lancashire to be suddenly whisked away, to all over Europe, playing in these different venues. It was just amazing, it was and that was the start of it. So
when you're thrown into a scenario like that, I know from my own experience, the first time that I, as a very new, very green audio engineer, went out into Europe, it was I think I was out there for a 5 or a 6 week run, and it wasn't just the beginning of my education on international touring. It was the beginning of a life education. It teaches you a lot, doesn't it? I think being out on the road suddenly, as you say, from a small rural community in Lancashire, thrust out into and Europe back there for you must have been such a different place to what we know today. It really begins to shape you and develop who you are.
Well, for instance, there's we were the first people ever to take merchandising into Spain.
Right.
Nobody had ever sold T-shirts at Spanish gigs before. So
Really?
that was, we were I was the very first, and that was on a Motorhead gig or a Motorhead tour. We did quite a few gigs in Spain, and that was very strange because
How were the sales those nights in Spain? Did people know what to do? Did it come as a surprise? Or
A, it was a surprise. B, I was attacked, I think, nearly twice because,
really?
well, for one, they thought they were free.
Okay.
There's a big stand there. They've got all these T-shirts and things. Do you just pick them up and walk away with them? And the other thing was they found it quite a sensitive. Barcelona, we played a night in Barcelona, and they like to take fireworks, etc., to venues, right, and set the fireworks off inside the venues.
Not so heavy on the health and safety regulations back then.
Absolutely, no, there was no health and safety back then. And they decided that if they threw the fireworks into the merchandising stand, they might be able to grab some T-shirts for free.
It's a distraction for you who's there trying to sell the stuff, then trying to put the fire out.
Well, it was kind of pick the firework up and throw it back again, so it was kind of like that night. So there was many experiences that were so different to what happened now, because everything's so organized now. We sneaked into various countries because we didn't know what would happen. We didn't know if customs and excise would turn up and just take everything away from us, so we'd hide them on tour buses and take them up just to get a kind of sense of if merchandising was the right thing to do. Right. So again, it was in places that I'd never had T-shirts sold, and there was places that were great, that they took it on well, and then there were places where it was sad because you realized that the price of the T-shirt was sometimes what people would earn in a whole month. Right. So that was so there was two sides to it.
Yeah, and I suppose that really connects with what we were talking about in terms of it also being life lessons as well, because to you, having been looking after the merchandise stand, that's just the price of a T-shirt. But when you then realize the differences in value in different countries, you're learning a lot about the economics and the societies of these places that you're moving to, which is really, really valuable to understanding the world in which you're living at that time.
Different cultures, different places. For instance, Italy at that point, you took double your money with you just to get through it, because you suddenly realized very early on that if you paid for something, you'd get it. If you didn't pay for it, forget it.
So I'm aware time is ticking on, and I really want to. I'm interested to know how you transitioned from being behind the merch counter into being the tour manager for one of, as the book says, one of the most notorious hard rock bands in the world. So can you talk us through that transition and how that happened?
Okay, working for Motorhead was the best thing that ever happened to me. I'm
pleased to hear that. I'm pleased that it's a wholly positive thing.
Oh, totally. If it wasn't for them, I wouldn't have got to where I got, because the fact when people heard that there was a woman that was doing this, back, like I say, back in the 80s, they were going like, there's a woman tour managing? And they'd still question it until someone would say, yes, but did you know she's worked for Motorhead for 10 years? And they'd suddenly take a step back and go, oh my God.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah. So
in which case I had better take her seriously.
Yes, absolutely, because I'd survived it.
Yeah.
I had survived all those many times, but it was through them that I had seen everything too. Like you say, the cultures of every country, the fact that Motorhead did things that were before anybody's time. So we went places before anybody else had been there, did things before anybody else had done it. And because of all those experiences, even the ones that were naughty, should we say, that shouldn't have happened and were a bit badass, I guess, as you might say now, because of that, I knew how to get out of situations, how to deal with other situations, and how to respond to all of these. just through being there at the time. It was just, I was like a sponge taking all this information on.
Absolutely.
And so from that, I haven't ever come across a situation that I hadn't already dealt with or seen somebody else deal with it.
Well, you go around the world a few times with a group of people like that. You get to a point where there is nothing that you haven't seen. You know, in that with that genre of music, with that lifestyle at that period of time, even more interesting and varied life education experiences, I imagine.
Absolutely. And like I say, for that, I'm thankful. But how it transitioned was, again, I'd say about the 5th, 6th year with Motorhead, we were on tour in Europe, again, before the Euro, you know, so all these different countries. It was on the No Sleep at All tour, where we did 13 countries in 14 days.
Wow.
So that's one.
Yeah.
So 13 countries with 13 different currencies. Okay, so the tour manager just turned around to me one day and he went, Kim, I've got this coin here and it says kroner on it. But which kroner is it? Is it Danish? Is it Swiss? Where the hell is it from? I have no idea. So I took all of his money, sorted it all out for him into the different currencies, then took his receipts, put those into the different categories for him. And suddenly I was doing tour accounts.
Right. Which of course, there's an awful lot of accountancy work at levels of tour management that you have to take on. You have to know those things.
Again, like I say, times are different. So in those days, we were doing everything in cash too. We were getting paid in cash, and we paid for everything in cash.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so it was like a rolling stock. And so from that, there I am carrying all this money around with me and dealing with all this money.
And we're talking large amounts of cash at this point.
Yeah, I think I told you, you know, you fell through the floor when I told you the most money I ever had on me in cash was $750,000.
Yes,
strapped around my waist with gaffer tape. You know,
I love that story. I love the fact that, you know, for anybody that knows or understands the music industry, the whole thing ticks along, and a lot of good faith and a hell of a lot of gaffer tape. So I love the fact that you're there with $750,000 gaffer taped to your body like some cash-based flank jacket.
It really was, and that's how it was. So that was the most I ever had on me. But I used to just, the other thing, we used to carry it around in carrier bags too.
Right, as you do.
As you do. One of the strong things, especially, I know I'm digressing slightly here, but American tour managers were always known for being smartly dressed with their metal briefcase. I would be there in a pair of jeans, a t-shirt, and a carrier bag, you know, and inside the Sainsbury's carrier bag or whoever's carrier, there are other supermarkets out there, but there I was with this plastic carrier bag, and then there I'd have £20,000, £30,000. You know?
As if they, at that period of time, they wouldn't have been disarmed enough by the fact that you were the tour manager. As a woman, you're there with tens of thousands of dollars in your shopping bag. Where's the bank? Where do I head to?
And well, like, yeah, it's crazy. So from that, we were on again with Motorhead, and we were in Paris, and it was 2 days before Christmas.
Mm-hmm.
We'd had a couple of days off. Everybody had gone out, done their own thing, and then the band came to me and said, "We'd like some cash, please." They were going home. We had some time off, so they wanted some cash for over Christmas, and they also wanted some money to go out and buy Christmas presents. So I can't really remember how much it was, but it was more like a couple of grand each in sterling and a couple of grand each in French francs.
Mm-hmm.
Now, remembering that I don't actually have all that in those particular currencies, but I do have it in other currencies. And it was a Saturday morning. So I take all this money and I run off and I go around all the banks and everywhere to get it changed over. And I managed to acquire all this money. Go back to the hotel to have it signed off by the tour manager. And I couldn't find him. He was nowhere to be found.
Oh.
So we were getting a bit nervous now because nobody had seen him. So we thought, okay, we'll knock on his door, no answer.
But given who you were touring with and the period we're talking about, would it be normal for people just to kind of disappear sometimes?
Yeah,
Well, I suppose maybe the band members, but not necessarily the tour
not
manager.
the tour manager. And he would have at least answered his door, you know, even like you and I know some days you're stuck in there for 4 days in your hotel room because you can't get out, but
No.
at least you'd answer the door. And that just wasn't happening. So we got the key thinking the worst, that he might be lied out on the floor, you know, something's happened to him.
Blimey, yeah.
But he'd gone. There was no sign of him. He'd done a bunk. He'd left.
Oh, he'd actually done a
Gone.
runner. He just, I mean, did you ever find out why?
Well, apparently he went on to tour manage other bands and do other things, but I think Motorhead was very challenging, extremely challenging. And
can you talk a bit about why, Kim?
Well, they love to play pranks on people. They love to push people to their limits, you know, like I say, just to push to see how far you can go. And I think some people could cope with it, some people couldn't.
Right.
And I guess living with somebody 24/7, if you don't click, you know, it's really hard to do. It's hard to do.
I often say, and even in the relatively mild manner touring world as it is, relatively speaking, to today, you know, your ability to do whatever your job you're on the road to do is kind of a given. A huge amount of whether you're on that tour or not is whether somebody or the rest of the tour party can put up with you on the bus or not.
Yeah. You forget that you're living in such close proximity to people, you know, a foot around yourself, that's probably your space, and
you build up very uniquely intimate relationships with those people, and you have to be able to deal with people at their best and their worst, whatever that may be.
Yes. So for whatever reason, he'd gone. Now, because it was so close to Christmas and nobody wanted to fly out and do the gig, there was nobody to do it anyway. And so what do we do that night? And the manager just said to me, Kim, just do it. Just go ahead and do it. We trust you. You just got to collect the money and go ahead.
Wow.
And it was like, so that's how I did it. And people.
That was how it happened. That's
how it happened.
That's the career progression.
Yeah. I was in the right place at the right time and moved on. Because I say that to many people now who have wanted a career in the industry. It's like, unless you're there, it's not going to happen. So put yourself there, and you never know what will happen, you know.
Things really haven't changed that much from that perspective. You kind of, sometimes you've got to be in the right place at the right time and say yes. One of the things you and I talked about was just don't say no. Just don't say no to anything. Be able to take the opportunities when they come and leap at them when they do.
Yeah, because what's the worst can happen, you know? Exactly. You can just go home.
Yeah, like the previous tour manager decided.
Exactly. So that was basically how it happened. Not like there are now all these courses and training courses for tour management and things. My training course was those 10 years with Motorhead, and through that it got crazy because there was a band in America looking for a tour manager, and they'd been through God knows how many in really short space of time on this one particular tour. And the lead singer, who was female, turned around and went, can't a woman do this? Why were there no women out there doing this? And so the manager went, well, I'll take a look. So he had a look, and they couldn't find any Americans that could do it. And so they came to the UK. And then we realized that there was actually, at the time, only 6 people in the whole world that were calling themselves tour managers and were female.
Which is a shocking statistic, isn't it, really?
Yeah. That's why I'm kind of proud of the fact that I can actually say I was one of the first. I never know if I was one of the first, because there might have been tour managers 100 years ago that have never spoke. I don't know. But,
of course, but in terms of our sort of modern contemporary idea of touring with musical artists, you were definitely up there amongst the first that were doing it. But as I mentioned in my introduction, you don't like the label or the tagline of being a pioneer.
No, I do and I don't. It's a catch-22, and the reason for that is I never went out to be what I became. It just happened, and I loved every second of it. And I want to just encourage people to do things that they wouldn't necessarily want to do. I was so scared when I first set off. My very first tour, I was so nervous. And on the train into London, there's a sign, and it's actually still there. And it's on the side of a pub, and it's advertising a beer, and it's Courage beer, right? So I'm sat on this train and I'm thinking, do you know what? I know, I'll just get the last train back. I'll get into Euston, get off the train, just get on another train and go back home. I don't need to do this. I don't want to do it.
Yeah.
And then I see this huge sign on this pub, and it just said, take courage. So I was like, okay. And again, going back to what we said before, like, what's the worst that could happen? And I think I suddenly thought to myself, the worst thing that could happen is that I could go home and I could become the woman in the department store selling the merchandising, or I could be the woman on tour selling the merchandise. And that, put the two together. If you don't try it, you never know, you just don't know. So I guess, and another reason I don't like being called a pioneer is there was no difference, male or female. I didn't go out to prove that I was a woman in a man's world or whatever. I never looked at it like that.
Because I suppose at that point in time, those discussions simply didn't even exist.
No. The fact, somebody once asked me a question, did I get paid the same amount of money as a male tour manager? I have no idea.
Right.
But I would never have asked that question, because it would never have occurred to me that I might have been getting less or whatever. And it didn't matter.
No.
Because I was loving what I did, which is kind of sad in one respect, but it just didn't even occur to me that people got paid differently.
You were laying groundwork, but doing it very much in your own way, in an era of things. Whereas they say it's not like now in the year 2021, where those conversations happen. I mean, they still don't happen as much as they should do, but they happen more frequently. And it's the gender balance topic is something that is spoken about much more widely. And certainly within that world for you at that point in time, it wasn't something that was ever going to come up. You'd broken ground simply by being there.
Mm-hmm. And I loved the fact that nobody took me seriously. I think we had seriously at venues, because I think
you talked to me about a couple of experiences you had where you were in on conversations that had people known you were the tour manager, they would never have had those conversations in front of you, but they never even thought that you could be a person of any level of responsibility, let alone the person that's in charge of the whole thing.
Yes, which was great, because their faces when you turn around and go like, well, actually, no. Earlier, you pointed out that you didn't have this particular brand or whatever, and you weren't even going to bother because nobody would notice. Unfortunately, you said that in front of me. So I did notice. So now we'll go back to what we wanted in the first place,
I think there was a specific story about, was it a bottle of vodka or a bottle of brandy that was decanted with
tequila.
some tequila, some
tequila.
much cheaper brand, and you managed to call them out.
I mean, it's something so tiny. It was about a bottle of tequila, but it was a few $100s worth of bottle of tequila. Mm-hmm. And this rider was not particularly big, not like a Motorhead rider that was actually 15 pages long of alcohol.
15 pages long rider.
Long rider.
How much of that? How much of that was either non-alcohol or edibles?
No, that was just the alcohol.
Oh right. Okay.
Yeah,
that was just the alcohol rider.
That had nothing to do with the sound and the technical rider or anything. That was the alcohol rider. It was 15 pages long, but so this was only like a paragraph, in comparison. It was nothing.
Of course.
And so this guy had realized that this tequila was very expensive. There was a bar within the venue, and I was actually sat close by, just watching everybody come in and just taking a few minutes to take a look around, see what the venue was like, and just sit there and compose myself for the rest of the day. This guy walks in and he leans over the bar and he said to this girl, like, do we have any of this particular tequila? And she was like, no, why? He said, I need it for the rider. She said, well, we did have a bottle, but it looks like it's in the bin now. It's empty. They must have used it last night. He said, well, just take it out. Is it there? You could see him looking over the bar. Is it there? Is it there? It's like, yeah, it's here. And she said, fill it up with something else. They'll never know any difference. The most that they'll notice is the fact the seal's been broken.
Right.
So, of course, I'd heard all of this. So I just loved it when I was able to walk into his office and just put the bottle on the table and go, and I think we'll change that.
Yeah. Yeah.
But
I would love to a bit of fly in the wall at that point to see because as a tour manager, there's times when that somebody's trying to take you for a bit of a ride, and it can be over relatively little things like a bottle of tequila, or it can be about really big important things like an awful lot of money.
Yes.
But being able to call people out from a man's perspective feels great. But for you, where essentially you're being taken for a ride, but having your gender used against you in that place, to be in a position where you can turn that full circle must have felt incredibly gratifying.
I think we also talked about the drum riser, like here's this.
Oh yes, yeah.
Yeah, we were on tour with, it was a double headliner, and as tour managers know, we hate double headliners because there's always that confrontation of we're better than you, we're doing this.
Oh, the battle of egos.
Yeah, it's horrible. And it was against two women rock bands, so that made it even worse. And we had done an overnighter to this venue, and we've been traveling, I think, for a couple of days to even get there. So they were there first. The other band were there first, and they'd set up. And their tour manager was a typical American, like I said, with the coat, suit on, Halliburton briefcase. I turned up, I'm there in my jeans and my t-shirt, and we're just walking a lot around the stage, and he goes, I'm so sorry, we've set up, but she's not here yet. She's apparently dyeing her hair, something happened, and she's going to get here, she's on her way. And I knew this was all lies, you could tell that it was all lies. So sure. You can't do a sound check. Basically what he was trying to do was prevent us to do any sound check at all, right, so that they could have all theirs sorted and we'd have nothing.
And also a little bit of power play there, trying to do whatever they can to kind of mess with your position on the stage and make you sound a little worse. And
yeah, and plus the fact you could see all the guys in the back that were with the band, all the road crew and stuff giggling behind them, like, this is going to be fun, we can play this one, we've got one over on her. So I just sat on each corner of the drum riser, and as I'm sat there, I took the brake off with my ankle and my foot, so this drum riser would move. So I just turned to the tour manager and I just said, so let me get this right, you can't move anything. And he was like, no, it's all down on the stage, we can't move a thing. So this, for instance, as I'm pushing back with my feet, this doesn't move.
Amazing.
It was just so good to go, so now it does move. We've got a clear stage. So we'll bring our stuff.
So we could maybe do something now while she dyes her hair.
Exactly. As if he thought that I was so stupid that I wouldn't even know how to just take the brakes off a drum right and move it. This was so again, he was looking at the little woman at the front.
And I guess, that leads me on to, I haven't wanted the whole session to be about, the difficulties and the pitfalls of being a female in the music industry then or now. But I do want to touch on it because I'm sure people are interested to know what that experience was like for you, and also what advice you would give young people generally, but also young women looking to get into the industry, and what you're, I think, explaining there is the way in which you began to be able to use the gender bias that was used against you to your favor, because in that situation, what are they going to do,
Exactly. I always said they take a guy around the back and punch him. What are they going to do to me?
Yeah, but that's not gonna swing, because the one thing that I do know about historical rock and roll bands and modern day rock and roll bands is they're quite old school when it comes to all of their their takes on things, and that would have caused a riot if that had happened. It was never going to
Exactly.
happen.
No, it wasn't. So in that, I guess I had one up on everybody else, and I used it. I never. I'm going to let you into a secret. Well, it's not actually, it isn't a secret. I was so jealous of the groupies that were on tour.
Right.
So jealous of them because they were stunning young women. They were stunning ladies and girlfriends of bands or whatever, and they were beautiful, gorgeous, 6 foot tall. I'm 5'4". Long, flowing blonde hair. I'm a brunette, and everything about them. And I just look at them in absolute awe and adoration. And I wouldn't look at them with disrespect whatsoever. I
No.
really wanted to be like them. So yeah, I walked around with my makeup on all the time. I had my nails done all the time. I never pushed boxes because I didn't have to.
Yeah.
So in one, yeah, I guess I played on it, but I don't regret doing that at all, But what I would say to women nowadays is that you can be whoever you want to be and still be on tour. My passion originally, I guess, was the fact that going back even before the astronaut thing, being a young kid growing up, is I wanted to be a singer.
Right.
In a rock band, I guess, or in a band, any kind of band.
We wanted to be involved in that
Yes.
industry.
But I can't sing and I can't play a musical instrument. So where do you go from there?
Yeah.
It's not, but I've had 40 years on tour. Now, you try and tell me as many bands or musicians that have had such a long career on tour as a musician.
Tiny minority of them.
Exactly. So yeah, so that's one thing I tell people: if you don't make it in music in one career, there are so many others out there, so many other different things that you can do within the music. You can go on tour being all kinds of things. I've had dentists, I've had hairdressers, I've had travel agents, all these different people have come on tour as part of the entourage to make things happen.
And I've always told when I was kind of growing up, to by my peers in the industry, expect to go in unexpected directions to achieve your eventual aims, and that's something that I still live my personal and my professional life by. It's a winding road, isn't it? But keep that final aim and that goal in mind, and you will get there.
You see, I think too, coming back to the book, when I originally wrote it a couple of years ago, I actually wrote it in anger.
That's interesting.
I wrote it because suddenly I was hearing all these women going like, I've been on tour for 5 years, so I'm out there telling women should be like this and you should do it like this, and we're the first to do it. And I was like, hold on a minute, some of us have been doing it a lot longer. You just haven't heard about us. So I was angry with them for coming out and declaring that they were the first of all this, that, and the other.
When you started on that road 40 years,
1979.
There's been a lot of battles that have been waged on their behalf by people who, with the greatest of respect, probably had things an awful lot tougher. Again, given the society that you were living in and the times you were living in at that point.
Well, it wasn't till after I'd written the book that I sat back and went, why am I angry at these young women? I should realistically be angry at myself because I haven't done anything out there. They've gone out and said, you can do this. I just sat back and was who I was. I didn't go out and tell the world about it or tell other women to go ahead and do it. So my anger changed from being angry at them and writing the book about my life to then thinking, do you know what? It's me. I should be angry at myself for not telling other people and educating people in the fact that you could do this and have a career out of it. So I changed my perspective of everything. And now that's what I want to do, is I want to go out there and encourage and help more women to get to where they're going, in whatever direction that is within the music industry.
Which is an amazing message. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
I know,
So
you know, for myself and everybody that I have the privilege of working with, there is a real drive and a real desire to see a better gender balance within the industry as a whole. I can only really speak for the live sector because that's my part of the industry, but I genuinely believe that we will be a better industry and better people and better at our work if we can find a better balance. And I like to think it's slowly getting better, but I still think, and I imagine you do too, that there's still an awful lot of work to be put in to address some of those pre and misconceptions.
absolutely, absolutely. If I can do it, you know, with all those things against me, then yeah, every woman out there can do it nowadays, because there are a lot more. There's not that wall that you're trying to fight and break down all the time. You know, it's halfway down now. All you
Yeah.
have to do is jump over
Which
it.
of course halfway down is still not all the way down, which is exactly what we're looking for. We are looking for ultimate parity, but it's
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 coming down slow.
moving slowly in the right direction, which must be really heartening for you. I mean, you must have. We've only got about 5 or so minutes left. You know, you must have seen in towards the latter stage of your touring career massive changes in the industry. I'm interested to know what led you to leaving the touring industry, the changes that you saw in that time, and where you're up to now, and how you see things progressing into the future once the book is published.
Okay, well, the reason why I gave up, there's two reasons I gave up tour managing. One was I had my daughter in 1995, and obviously tours in those days were 2-3 years long. You know,
Yeah.
it wasn't 2 or 3 months, it was 2 or 3 years where you did the whole world and you were out and you were gone. So I couldn't possibly do that any longer, and I didn't want to. I know there are some women that have chosen that their children have stayed at home with the other parent and they've gone away. And because what people don't realize is, if this is the only thing you know, you can't suddenly change your direction and do another job just to earn money in a
No.
world that this is all you know. So you carry on with it. I just didn't want to. But then I found myself in my next career, which we touched on earlier, which was troubleshooting in those days and these days, but now they call it crisis management, you know.
Right.
So even when I was doing crisis management, it wasn't called that, it was called troubleshooting, where I just would go out for like a week or so many days and then come home. So
Right.
I'm
Okay. So you got to go in and play that part and really kind of pull issues out, disseminate that, fix it, and then leave it to somebody else to put
and
into
I think,
motion.
but that job only came because of the experience I'd had, like the 25, 30, the experience you've had of all the different tours beforehand.
Of course.
So you can kind of find, you can know where the difficulties are coming from and where the problems are arising. But the other thing that I had about touring is that I communication, you know. We always used to say there used to be a tour manager and a manager above the tour manager, but the
Mhm.
manager was in charge of the band. It was his band, but he stayed behind a desk, and that's where he lived, was behind the desk, sorting out the next album, the next promotion, whatever, getting all the things in order. And all you were doing was taking the manager's job on tour.
Yeah.
Then suddenly you got mobile phones, so you could call people. And suddenly you get computers where you can talk to people. Like we are today, we're having a conversation like we were in the same room.
Absolutely.
But that didn't exist. And when I was touring as a tour manager, you would have problems that I couldn't have got on the screen and talked to you like we're doing now. I
No.
couldn't even have called you from some of the places we were.
It would
You know,
have been a case of
it's up to you.
once every few days you pass a phone box on the bus, so you pull the tour bus over, throw in some cash into the slot and fire in the important info, and then be on your way.
Exactly. So if there was some important decision to make, you'd have to make it that day and that moment, and you couldn't get hold of somebody you couldn't ask the manager's permission to do that.
So it was
A
on
big,
you.
it was on you. And a big one of that was this, when we had a band in Germany that had accepted an award, and the record company wanted them to fly up and collect this award because it was a live TV show. And of course we wanted the band to do that, but they also had a gig that night. So the problem there was, how do we get them 400 miles there and 400 miles back? I know, we'll hire a plane, let's hire a Learjet.
Yeah.
10 grand, it's worth it. That's 10 grand there and 10 grand back. So 20,000 pounds, bang, we've done it, collected the award, or do we not do it? And that decision was on my head.
Right.
So
and you're not talking about tiny decisions here. You're talking about massive investment and expenditure.
Exactly. So it was up to me to make that decision. I made that decision. We went, we did it. The band were loved even more. They sold more, which was great because it all fell into place. But it could have gone the other way too. Yeah. And the buck stopped with you. But that kind of thrill of like, have I done the right thing or not done the right thing? If you pull it off and you succeed, it's a great feeling to have. But that was taken away with communication, because nowadays you would not be allowed to make that decision. It would not be in your hands, because, like I say, we could have a conversation about it. You would decide, and you would tell me how to proceed.
Yeah, the role that you had, the role that you had learnt it and understood it to be, became a little more vacuous. It really lost an element of its heart and soul.
Exactly, and I felt I was, not that I'm by any means, sort of playing down the role of a tour manager, but I felt as a person that had been able to make those decisions, my role was becoming more like babysitting than actually doing a job. And it was only because I'd seen the other side of it. I should imagine if you go into it now, there are still problems and still things you would sort that you could do by being taught those. Whereas in those days you had to have not been taught it the same way. You have to have it from
I understand. Modern mobile communication has changed an awful lot of things in the industry, and it's a vastly different industry today than the one that you grew up into.
A smaller world.
Really. It really is on every level. And I'm looking at the time, I could happily sit here for another hour and pick your brains on the detailed differences between your touring world and the touring world now, or just pre-COVID, and maybe one day we'll get the opportunity to do that. We've had one question come in from Strawn Oswald that I want to put to you quickly, Kim, because it's very prescient and of the now. They say, not sure if there is time, but would love to hear both Olly and Kim's thoughts, as Brexit COVID has disrupted the career opportunities that would normally be obtained through attending concerts and networking with personnel in the live sector. What would you say is the modern way of breaking into the music business, i.e. the modern merch selling roadie? Is there even a modern way, or are we treading unknown territory now?
Okay, I personally have seen it before Brexit and after Brexit.
Yeah.
We did it before.
Yeah.
That's what I say to people. Now, hell, we did it before, so you can do it again. And if you, one particular thing springs out to me just in that you sort of the wording of that, don't wait for the opportunities to come to you, go out there and find them. Go out and work at music events, go out and give yourself every opportunity to seize what you want in life, because I have employed so many road crew, etc., from people that have worked at venues that just happened to be in the right place at the right time. We had a lighting engineer that became ill, had to go home. And we took the guy from the venue that night who stood in for him because he was so good, and he filled in. It's like, go, we haven't got time to come with us. And he became the lighting engineer for that band in the end.
And that goes to show just how things can happen. And I can say from a modern world, those exact same opportunities do come your way.
So that's my advice to people is, and stop worrying about the Brexits and the this and the that and the other, you know. There were days when we used to go into places and we pay VAT in so many different countries, it was unbelievable. But you get used to it. It's just a change. And if there wasn't for change, things would get so boring anyway.
Well, that is true. I think from my perspective, it's certainly frustrating given the double whammy of COVID and Brexit as worries around our industry. COVID will, one way or the other, pass, which will be good for everybody on the planet. And as far as Brexit goes, yes, it is frustrating, but we are where we are now, and we are creative, adaptable people working in a creative world, and we will find our way. We have to find our way. It's music won't just stop. It'll be harder for a while, and then we'll find our flows and we'll get on with it.
I hope COVID has made everybody hungry for all kinds of music.
Likewise.
You know? We've been starved for so many months now, but I hope people are desperate to go out and listen to any type of music, you know. Don't just put yourself in a box and go, well, I like this kind of music. Go and see everything and anything in live events. Just go and explore it.
Take a punt and go and experience and enjoy the freedoms again that we've lost over these last 15 months or so.
Absolutely, because I remember it was my daughter actually that took me to my first opera.
Amazing.
I loved it. It was just absolutely incredible. So, you know, heavy metal to opera. Who could count on that one?
Well, there's a fantastic title for the follow-up book for you, Kim.
I don't. Oh my goodness, no, I'm not professional enough to be into the opera side of it, because those guys I was in awe of them, you know.
For the world, isn't it? It really is. Okay. Listen, we're a little over time, so I better round up. As I say, as much as I would love to sit here and talk to you for as long as we possibly could. It's been fantastic getting to talk to you today and previously, Kim. I hope we have the opportunity to stay in touch and maybe sit down over a coffee and speak face to face. Continue with the good work at the COVID testing station. All the very, very best for the publishing and the release of the book for everybody. It's Lipstick and Leather. It's going to be a fantastic read.
Excellent.
I wish you all the very best, Kim, and thank you again from everybody at XpoNorth for coming and talking to us today. It's been really great.
My pleasure. Thank you, Olly.
Thank you very much, Kim. You take care now.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.